Throughout human history, wells have not only provided us with the source of life, they've also formed the center of our communities. They've been venerated as sacred places and surrounded by myth and superstition. They're also apparently an extremely convenient place to dispose of an unwanted body or two. Today on the Literate Ghost Recommends, we'll be taking a look at 6 classic ghost stories that dive into the dark and murky world of the well. Our first story is, unsurprisingly, The Well by W.W.Jacobs, first published in 1902 in the story collection The Lady of the Barge. An argument, a threat of blackmail, a disappearance, and of course an old well that may or may not keep its secrets. The well, which had long ago fallen into disuse, was almost hidden by the thick tangle of undergrowth which ran riot at that corner of the old park. The full light of the sun never reached it, and the ground surrounding it was moist and green when other parts of the park were gaping with the heat. She stooped for a stone and dropped it down. "Fancy being where that is now," she said, peering into the blackness. "Fancy going round and round like a mouse in a pail, clutching at the slimy sides, with the water filling your mouth, and looking up to the little patch of sky above." A School Story by M.R.James, first published in More Ghost Stories of an Antiquary in 1911. A man relates a strange story from his school days some 30 years previous about the unusual disappearance of one of his teachers, Mr. Sampson. It all began with the mysterious, threatening messages, both written in Latin. The first being, "Remember the well among the 4 U's," and the second, "If you don't come to me, I'll come to you." I asked him what he had heard or seen. "I didn't hear anything at all," he said. "But about 5 minutes before I woke you, I found myself looking out this window here, and there was a man sitting or kneeling on Samson's windowsill and looking in, and I thought he was beckoning." "What sort of man?" McLeod wriggled. "I don't know," he said, "but I can tell you one thing. He was beastly thin, and he looked as if he was wet all over. And," he said, looking round and whispering as if he hardly liked to hear himself, "I'm not at all sure that he was alive." Next day, Mr. Sampson was gone. The White Flag by Sabine Baring-Gould, first published in 1904 in a Book of Ghosts. A woman desperately seeking revenge for the murder of her son turns to an ancient pagan power in defiance of Providence. These were her only thoughts, and the sole passage in her Bible she could read, in which she had read over and over again, was the story of the importunate widow who cried to the judge, "Avenge me of mine adversary," and who was heard for her persistent asking. Then all at once an idea shot like a meteor through her brain. She remembered to have heard of the cursing well of St. Elion. She continued. Stone after stone was dropped, and the ritual was followed, till the 17th had disappeared in the well, when up rose a column of black fluid, boiling as if it were from below, the color of ink, and the widow pressed her hands together and drew a sigh of relief. Her prayer had been heard, and her curse had taken effect. Wailing Well by M.R.James, first published in 1928. Stanley Judkins, the world's worst Boy Scout, is constantly defying the orders of his superiors. However, he takes things just a bit too far when he ventures into the forbidden field that harbors the Wailing Well. "There's some perhaps could tell you who they was," said the shepherd, "but it was afore my time they come by their end, and why they goes there still is more than the children of men can tell. Except I've heard they was all bad uns when they was alive. I see 'em, each one of 'em, come peering out of the bushes. Rags and bones, young gentlemen, all four of 'em, fluttering rags and whitey bones." He looked at the field, and there he saw a terrible figure, something in ragged black, with whitish patches breaking out of it, the head perched on a long, thin neck, half hidden by a shapeless sort of blackened sunbonnet. The Wishing Well by E.F.Benson, first published in the February 1929 edition of Hutchinson's magazine. In the remote village of St. Gervais stood the Wishing Well, still used by the superstitious villagers for matters of healing and of love, but it could also be put to a darker purpose. Something stirred beside her. She knew that the presence which had terrified her before was manifest again. She turned with hands of welcome, and there beside her was the shroud-wrapped figure and the wizened face. But now the shroud was white no longer, but spotted with earth mold, and the flesh was rotting from the face. It was very deep, and the sides of it were slippery with slime and water moss. Once she caught at the step on which she had knelt, but her fingers failed to grasp it and she sank. Once after that she rose, and then there came a roaring in her ears, and to her eyes a blackness, and down her throat there poured the cool water of the Wishing Well. Yet another story by M.R.James, who apparently had a fascination with wells. The Treasure of Abbot Thomas by M.R.James, first published in 1904 in Ghost Stories of an Antiquary. Mr. Somerton succeeds in solving the riddle that surrounds the hidden treasure of the enigmatic Abbot Thomas. He finds the treasure deep within a monastery well. Unfortunately, he finds something else besides, something waiting there for him. Well, I felt to the right and my fingers touched something curved that felt, yes, more or less like leather. Dampish it was, and evidently part of a heavy, full thing. And I went on pulling out the great bag in complete darkness. It hung for an instant on the edge of the hole, then slipped forward onto my chest and put its arms round my neck. I was conscious of a most horrible smell of mold, and of a cold kind of face pressed against my own, and moving slowly over it, and of several, I don't know how many, legs or arms or tentacles or something clinging to my body. There was someone or something on the watch outside my door the whole night. I almost fancy there were two. It wasn't only the faint noises I heard from time to time all through the dark hours, but there was the smell, the hideous smell of mold, as intense as it had been in the well. And what is more, it came from outside the door.